coming, and Rebecca and the staff and Trey and miss anybody, I hope not. But and also, if you're interested in the gelatin workshop, on October the 31st, I think it is, there's a sign-up sheet for that. So there will be a workshop in connection with this. Now, art. Okay. I hear a lot of artists say that a lot of times they do art to express themselves, to find out who they are. I have family here and friends. I don't think that any, and they would testify that I've never had trouble expressing myself. So I had to find a raison d'etre. I had to find another reason. But for me personally, art is to tell a story, to document time or history. That's important for me to be able to have you to learn something. As I've learned things, I like to document what I have found to be truthful. And I started out as a watercolorist, but actually I think I was born way too late because I like to gather and hunt. And I like to take those things and incorporate them into art. So, I wanted more tactile feeling. I wanted more involvement. And so making fresco and doing handmade paper seemed to fit that bill. And that's what you'll see in the gallery back here. You'll see a little bit of the watercolor. You're going to see some of the equipment that I use to make, and it's very simple, it's very primitive. And I could have prettied it up, but that's the way it is. And it's most of the time when I'm dressed, it's got holes in it, or I've got paint or something like that. So I'm really dressed up tonight. I bought a new outfit, so all right. But so the fresco, maybe some of you don't even know what a fresco is. But in the simplest terms, it is simply painting on wet plaster. And you will see a little bit of the tools and what I use. The same thing with handmade paper. What you will see in the gallery to my left is primarily done with no paint brush, but it is dyed paper pulp, which I apply with my hands or sometimes with a palette knife. And I will sculpt with my hands or just pour it. So, now, paintings. Holy Land Revisited. And some of these titles are for memories or things that I wanted to say. And if you get a secondary meaning out of some of these, I hope that you will. So, I guess a good place to start is the heavens. And I remember when I was a young girl, lying on the ground at night and looking up in the sky, and it was so bright, the stars were so bright. And nowadays, it isn't so bright, is it? You look and you don't really see, and that's sad. But I look at this, and I never quite know if I'm quite finished with this one. And I thought, maybe I need to put another star, another comet or something. And I used to teach earth science too, along with some other things. Jackie, what did I teach you? I forgot. Biology. Uh-oh, that was when I was at Hickory High School and in High Road. Okay. But at any rate, I never know if it's finished. And is it finished? I don't know. And I guess as long as we're here, we're not finished either, are we? Okay, we're not finished either. Next. Contentment shall be your meat. As we drove along in the bus in Samaria, I would look out and I would see these men with young boys tending their sheep. And it made me think about my own father. And he was a building contractor and he had a lumber company. But he had a farm, we had lived on a farm, and he always had to have something growing, something to harvest. And so when I would look at that, and after I did it, I was reading some scripture, and it seemed to be that phrase and I think it came from Proverbs or maybe Psalm, but contentment shall be your meat. And I thought how contented I was at the end of the day to walk with my dad through the woods on that path, walk by the old tobacco barn, going by the old pack house. Some of you younger ones probably don't have a clue what I'm talking about. They don't know what that is. But we might even talk about, well, what Mom was going to have for dinner. And my hope is that children and parents will have that same experience everywhere. Okay? Thy soul's thirst shall be satisfied. This is another one that was came from a scriptural passage. But women have gathered water from rivers and streams and springs and wells forever to feed or cook with their families. It's a great place for fellowship and communication. And I didn't at first have these women in there, but after rains, and sometimes they can be torrential, there'll be a lot of water. But we had a well and we had a spring, and I remember that sometimes we would use it as home base. And it was a good place to go to play, and sometimes, if you remember, they had this windlass that you would have to wind up, and I remember one time that thing got loose and hit my brother in the head and almost knocked him out. So it's a good, happy memory there, too. Right? Ruins at Caesarea. This is where King Saul actually met his demise, where he killed himself, actually. And there are large structures there that have been handmade, built by human beings. But we have to realize that everything we do is temporal on this life. We're here only part-time. We are not here permanently. So I think that's a good thought for all of us to keep that in mind, and it helps us to keep our perspectives. Midst thy dark streets shineth. Not many of us have ever really experienced 100% dark. I did only one time, and it was flunking, cave exploration. And I remember we had a professor and a child that almost lost it in there. And you just yearn for a flicker of light. And it made me think of when I was a preschooler. And I was in the Sunbeam Bands, and we had a watchword, and that watchword was Isaiah 61, and it was, "In part, thy light has come." So we can be thankful that we have a light to go to. Narrow is the path. Oh my, the most narrow path I've ever been on was in the rainforest of Costa Rica. And I talked to some gentleman here tonight. He said he had had a 1,000-mile journey on a horse. Well, I had a ride up the top of the mountain on this wild horse. Well, if any of you know anything about horses, when you turn that thing around, it wants to go back to the barn. And it wants to go back to the barn in a hurry. I lost control of the horse. I managed, I tried to get control, I tried to coerce it, I tried to handle it. And I looked over the cliff, and I thought, and this is true, I thought, I will surely die in this place. I thought, well, if I'm going to die, I'm going to go out in a blaze of glory. And I did something. I turned loose. I let go. And it was a glorious ride. So sometimes what we have to do, we have to turn loose too, to get ahead. My food shall be your contentment. When I did this one, I thought I was finished. I thought, well, no, I've got to put the shepherd in here. But then I thought, well, you know, in a perfect world, there doesn't have to be a shepherd. There's no fear there's nothing really to be afraid of. And so I decided not to put a shelter because all is at peace. Monastery at Jericho, and I think this is the last one. I looked at that and I thought, how in the world did they ever get that up there? I think we have a tendency to think that our generation is the smartest, knows how to do everything the best, and we wonder, how did this happen? How did it get there? But that was on a lonely hill up there. And I looked at that and I wondered at the commitment that it takes to go to a place like that, to stay day in and day out. And so when I looked at that, it made me begin to wonder, could I be alone with God that much time? And I'm not sure that I could, because it would take so much commitment, and I'm not sure that I could, but my hope is that I would. Okay, thank you very much. Now what I would suggest that you do is go in there, and the frescoes to the right, again, just some of you may have been in there already. And by the way, I studied fresco at a monastery. When I went, it was the week of silence, but since I was the only non-Catholic, I didn't think it applied to me. So, I ignored that. I went right along. I got along fine. So thank you very much.